It was one of those quiet afternoons when the world feels calm, and everything seems to move slowly. The sun was still bright, hanging low in the sky, and the air carried that soft warmth that makes you forget the time. A teenager was driving home after basketball practice, his gym bag sitting on the passenger seat, and his favorite playlist playing softly in the background. He wasn't speeding or doing anything wrong, just a tired kid heading home after a long day, thinking about dinner and maybe a quick shower before starting homework. He didn't notice the police car behind him right away. It was a few cars back at first, then it got closer. He thought nothing of it. He had seen police cars on the road before. But then the patrol car seemed to stick behind him, turning when he turned, slowing down when he slowed down. A small knot of worry started building in his stomach. He checked his mirrors again, hoping maybe they'd turn off at the next intersection, but they didn't. The flashing red and blue lights suddenly came alive, filling the inside of his car with a blur of color. His heart dropped. He pulled over to the side of the road like his mother had taught him. Stay calm, keep your hands visible, don't make sudden moves. Those words echoed in his mind as he rolled down the window and placed both hands on the steering wheel. 2 officers stepped out of the car. One looked older, tall and serious, the other younger, with a hand resting near his belt. The boy felt his pulse quicken. He tried to take a slow breath, remembering everything his mom ever told him about what to do in these moments. The older officer approached the driver's side, shining his flashlight inside the car even though it was still daylight. "License and registration," he said in a flat tone. The boy nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. My license is in my wallet. It's in my back pocket." The officer didn't respond, just kept staring, waiting. The boy moved slowly, speaking with every motion. "I'm reaching for it now, okay?" The younger officer stood a few feet behind, his hand still resting on the holster. The boy could feel his eyes watching every move he made. He handed over the license with a slight tremble in his fingers. The officer looked at it for a moment, then at the boy. "Do you know why we stopped you?" "No, sir," the boy replied softly. "I didn't think I did anything wrong." The officer tilted his head. "You fit the description of someone we're looking for. A vehicle similar to this one was involved in a robbery earlier today." The words hit him hard. "A robbery?" "I was just at basketball practice. You can call my coach. I didn't do anything." The officer didn't seem convinced. "Where were you between 3 and 4 this afternoon?" "I was at school. Practice ended around 5. The younger officer circled around the car, peering through the windows like he was searching for something. The boy felt his throat tighten. He wanted to text his mom, to tell her what was happening, but his phone was in the cup holder and he didn't dare reach for it. "Step out of the vehicle," the older officer said suddenly. The boy froze. "Sir, did I do something wrong?" "Just step out," the officer repeated, this time with more force. His stomach turned. He opened the door slowly, his hand still raised. He could feel the eyes of people in nearby cars glancing over. Someone slowed down, maybe curious, maybe recording. He stood beside his car, the gravel crunching under his sneakers. He tried to keep his breathing steady. The younger officer moved closer now, scanning him up and down. "Where are you headed?" the officer asked. "Home," he said quietly. "It's just a few blocks away." The older one leaned forward. "Mind if we look inside your car?" He hesitated. "Do you have to?" "I didn't do anything." The officer's tone hardened. "You have something to hide?" "No, sir," the boy said quickly. "Nothing. My mom told me I don't have to say yes unless there's a reason." That sentence made both officers pause. The younger one frowned. "Your mom told you that, huh? Maybe she should teach you some respect too." The boy swallowed hard. He could feel his chest getting tight, fear pressing against his ribs. "I'm not trying to be disrespectful," he said softly. "I just don't understand why this is happening." The older officer exchanged a look with his partner. "We'll see about that," he said, turning toward the car. Inside, the boy's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it for half a second. It was his mom. The screen showed her name, and for a brief moment he felt a bit of hope. But he couldn't move. The younger officer's voice cut through the silence. "Keep your hands where I can see them." "Yes, sir," he said quickly. His voice cracked slightly. The older officer was now peering into the car. "What's in the bag?" he asked, pointing at the gym bag on the passenger seat. "My basketball stuff. Shoes, jersey, towel." "Open it." The boy's hand shook slightly as he reached for the bag. Can I use one hand?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The officer nodded. He opened the zipper slowly, showing the inside. The bag was exactly what he said it was. Nothing but sweaty clothes and a basketball. The officer stared for a moment, then looked back at his partner. "Doesn't match the description," the younger one muttered, still sounding skeptical. The boy looked between them, unsure what to say or do. His eyes burned, not from tears but from frustration, fear, and confusion all tangled together. He had done everything right, but somehow it still felt like he was losing control of the situation. The older officer walked around to the back of the car, pretending to check the license plate. The younger one stayed close, his posture still tense. "Can I ask?" the boy said carefully. "If I'm free to go now?" The younger officer smirked. "In a hurry, are you?" "No, sir, I just want to go home." The older one came back, shaking his head slightly. "We're still checking something." He stood there, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the road. Cars passed slowly. Some drivers looked away. Others glanced in sympathy. Minutes felt like hours. He wished his mom would call again or maybe drive by, though that seemed impossible. But at that very moment, as if fate had hurt him, a black SUV turned onto the street. It rolled closer, slowing as it approached. The boy recognized it instantly. His mother's car. He felt his chest loosen a little, but also tense again because he didn't want her to panic. The SUV stopped a short distance away. The door opened and a woman stepped out, tall, calm, and confident. Her steps were quick but controlled. The officers turned at the sound of her voice before she even reached them. "What exactly is going on here?" she asked, her tone steady but sharp enough to cut through the air. The boy didn't speak, afraid that one word might make things worse, but the look on her face said everything, a mix of anger, fear, and fierce protectiveness. The older officer straightened. "Ma'am, please stay back. We're handling a situation." "That's my son," she said, not moving back an inch. "And I asked you what situation you think you're handling." The younger officer blinked. "Your son?" She nodded once, then slowly reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out something that caught the sunlight. A badge. The boy saw the flash of silver and felt his heart pound for an entirely different reason. His mother wasn't just his mom in that moment. She was special agent in every sense of the word. The officers froze, unsure of what to say. The air went still. The mother's expression didn't change. She looked from one officer to the other, her voice cool and firm. "Why are you stopping a minor with no probable cause?" "What exactly did he do?" The older officer opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The younger one shifted awkwardly, his earlier confidence gone. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you have a report matching his license plate? Did you radio this in?" Neither officer answered right away. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. The boy stood still beside his car, his hand still raised slightly, not daring to relax yet. He watched his mother handle the situation the same way she had always handled everything in life, calmly, but with authority that demanded respect. The tension that had filled the air moments ago began to break. The officers stepped back, realizing the situation had turned. His mother turned to him briefly and said quietly, "It's okay now. Just breathe." For the first time in what felt like forever, he let out a full breath. The fear that had gripped him so tightly began to ease. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone anymore. And neither were the officers, who had just realized they had made a serious mistake. The street was quiet except for the low hum of passing cars and the faint chirp of crickets starting their evening song. The mother stood between her son and the two officers, her presence calm but strong. She didn't raise her voice or make a scene. She didn't have to. Her steady tone carried more power than any shout could. The officer stood still, unsure how to react. The older one looked like he wanted to explain himself, but the words didn't come easily. The younger one shifted his weight, glancing at the badge that gleamed in the fading sunlight. It was clear that neither of them expected this moment to unfold the way it did. The boy stayed beside the car, his hands still close to his sides, too afraid to move even though he could finally breathe again. His mother turned toward him briefly. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He nodded quickly, though his voice was shaky. "Yeah, I think so." She looked him over carefully, making sure he wasn't hurt or trembling too much. Then she faced the officers again, her expression steady. "You stopped a 16-year-old driving home from practice." You accused him of being part of a robbery. I'd like to know what made you think that. The older officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, the car looks similar to one we were told to watch for. We were just doing our job. She folded her arms, not convinced. Just doing your job doesn't mean assuming guilt without evidence. Did you verify the plate number before approaching him? He hesitated. Not yet, she repeated. Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes narrowed slightly. So you approached a minor, drew suspicion, and made him step out of his car without verifying anything. That's not procedure. That's poor judgment. The younger officer looked uncomfortable. He mumbled something about following orders, but his voice trailed off when her gaze shifted toward him. The boy wanted to speak, to tell her how scared he had been, but the lump in his throat wouldn't let him. His hands still felt cold even though the air was warm. He stared at the road, trying to shake off the feeling of fear that had wrapped itself around him. Do you have your body cameras on? She asked. Both officers looked at each other, then nodded. Good, she said. Then this entire stop is recorded. He'll have no problem explaining it later. The older one swallowed hard. Ma'am, we didn't mean any harm. She raised a hand slightly, stopping him. Intent isn't the same as impact, officer. You didn't mean harm, but you caused it. My son was terrified. I know because I've trained officers who understand what that kind of fear looks like. The younger one blinked. You train officers? She nodded. Yes, I work with the FBI. I handle cases that involve protocol, risk assessment, and accountability. So, believe me, I know the difference between good policing and unnecessary intimidation. A quiet tension settled over the street. Even the sound of traffic seemed to fade for a moment. The officers stood stiffly, their confidence slipping away with every word she spoke. The boy's mother took a slow breath, lowering her voice. You know what hurts the most? She said quietly. That he did everything right. He stopped the car, he kept his hands visible. He spoke respectfully and still. He wasn't safe. The older officer lowered his eyes slightly. We didn't know he was your son. She shook her head. That's exactly the problem. You shouldn't have to know who he belongs to before you treat him with respect. The words hung in the air. The younger officer looked down, suddenly unsure of himself. The older one shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck. The boy finally spoke, his voice soft but steady. Mom, it's okay. I'm fine. She turned toward him, her face softening. You shouldn't have to be fine after something like this, she said gently. You should have just come home like any other kid. He didn't answer. His eyes dropped to the ground. A car slowed down nearby, the driver glancing out the window before continuing down the road. Someone on the sidewalk across the street had their phone out, recording from a distance. The mother noticed but didn't care. She wasn't there to put on a show. She was there to make sure this never happened again to anyone. After a moment, she reached for her phone. I need your supervisor's name, she said firmly. The older officer hesitated. Ma'am, I don't think that's necessary. It's necessary, she interrupted calmly. Because if you had followed basic procedure, we wouldn't be standing here. And I'm not going to let this be brushed aside. He sighed, realizing he had no choice. He gave her the name and she typed it into her phone without another word. The boy leaned slightly against the car, trying to steady his breathing. His mother put a hand on his shoulder. Sit down, sweetheart, she said softly. Take a moment. He nodded and sat back in the driver's seat, resting his head against the steering wheel for a second. The tension in his body started to ease, replaced by exhaustion. The mother turned back to the officers. Next time you stop someone, remember that your authority doesn't make you right. It makes you responsible. The older one nodded quietly. Understood, ma'am. The younger one looked like he wanted to apologize but didn't know how. He just kept glancing between the badge on her jacket and the boy in the car. She gave them one last look. You can go, she said. We're done here. The officers hesitated, then walked back to their patrol car. The sound of their boots on the pavement echoed like an uneasy reminder of what had just happened. The car drove off slowly, the flashing lights gone, leaving behind the faint scent of dust and gasoline. For a moment, silence filled the air again. The mother stood there looking at her son through the open window. Her expression softened. You handled yourself well, she said quietly. I know it wasn't easy. He looked up at her, his eyes tired. I didn't know what to do. I just tried to remember what you told me. That's exactly what saved you, she said gently. He gave a small, shaky laugh. I didn't think it would actually happen, not here. Not like this. She nodded slowly, her voice heavy with emotion. That's the thing. It happens when you least expect it. She walked around to the passenger side and got in, resting her hands on the dashboard for a moment before speaking. You okay to drive? He nodded, starting the engine. The car hummed softly and they pulled back onto the road. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The radio was off, and the only sound was the low rumble of the tires against the pavement. The boy glanced at his mom a few times, unsure of what to say. Finally, he asked, Were you scared? She looked out the window for a moment before answering. Yes, she admitted softly. I was terrified, but I couldn't show it. I needed them to see confidence, not fear. He nodded slowly. I thought about calling you, he said quietly. But I didn't want to make things worse. You did the right thing, she told him. You stayed calm. You stayed alive. That's what matters. They drove in silence again, the neighborhood lights flickering past. She looked at him, seeing not just her son but every young person who had ever faced the same fear for no reason at all. When they reached home, she told him to go inside while she made a quick call. He obeyed without argument. Inside, he dropped his bag by the door and sat on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. His body still felt tense, like it hadn't realized the danger was over. Outside, she stood in the driveway, phone pressed to her ear. She spoke firmly but professionally to the officer's supervisor, explaining what happened in detail. She didn't raise her voice or make threats. She didn't need to. Her words carried the quiet authority of someone who had seen too many stories like this end the wrong way. When she hung up, she took a long breath and looked up at the darkening sky. The stars were just starting to appear, faint and far away. She whispered a silent thank you that her son was home safe. Back inside, she found him sitting at the kitchen table, still in his practice clothes, staring at his untouched glass of water. She walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. It's over, she said softly. You're safe. He looked up at her, his eyes glassy with exhaustion. Do you think they'll get in trouble? He asked quietly. She hesitated. I think they'll be questioned. Whether they learn from it, that's another story. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. I just don't get it. I didn't do anything wrong. She sat down beside him, her expression filled with both sadness and pride. You shouldn't have to understand it, she said gently. You just have to live through it. And you did. The boy nodded slowly, his mind replaying every moment of the stop. The flashing lights, the harsh tone, the fear that something terrible might happen. He knew he'd remember that feeling for a long time. His mother reached out and squeezed his hand. We'll talk more tomorrow, she said. Right now, try to rest. He nodded again, and for the first time that night, he managed a small smile. As he went upstairs, she sat there for a moment longer, staring at the front door. She knew the incident was over for now, but the story was only beginning. Tomorrow, she'd make sure this moment didn't just fade away. It would become a reason for change, not just for her son, but for everyone who deserved to feel safe just driving home. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, lighting up the kitchen in a soft golden hue. The smell of toast and coffee filled the air. The mother sat quietly at the table, her laptop open in front of her, a mug between her hands. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her son standing on the side of the road, hands raised, fear in his eyes. She glanced at her phone. Several messages had come in overnight, some from her colleagues, others from neighbors who had seen the video someone had recorded. It had already started spreading online. The headline wasn't surprising. Teen pulled over without cause. Mother reveals she's an FBI agent. She sighed softly. This wasn't the kind of attention she wanted, but maybe, just maybe, it could lead to something good. Upstairs, her son was awake too. He sat on the edge of his bed looking at his phone. Dozens of messages had popped up from friends, classmates, even people he barely knew. Some were supportive. That was crazy, glad you're okay. Others were just curious. Is it true your mom's FBI? He didn't know what to say to any of them. He didn't even know how to feel yet. He went downstairs slowly, still in the same hoodie he'd worn the night before. His mother looked up as he entered. Morning, she said softly. Morning, he replied, pulling out a chair. He poured himself some cereal but barely touched it. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy. filled with thoughts they both shared but didn't want to say out loud. Finally, she broke the silence. "The department called me early this morning," she said. "They want to meet. The video's already making rounds online. It's getting attention." He frowned. "Are you in trouble?" She shook her head. "No, but they're embarrassed." "And they should be." She paused. "They want to discuss what happened, and probably try to fix their image before this gets worse." He looked down at his cereal. "Are you going to tell them what they did?" "I'm going to tell them the truth," she said simply. He nodded slowly. "Good." After breakfast, she got ready for work. She put on her usual dark suit and clipped her badge to her belt. She hesitated for a moment at the front door, looking back at her son. "You staying home today?" He nodded. "Yeah, I don't really feel like going to school." She gave a small, understanding smile. "That's okay. You rest," he nodded again. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Thanks for showing up when you did." Her eyes softened. "Always," she said. Then she stepped out, closing the door gently behind her. At the FBI field office, she walked through the lobby, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Colleagues greeted her with quiet nods. Some had seen the video too, but didn't know what to say. She appreciated the silence more than the sympathy. When she reached the meeting room, a few senior officers from the local police department were already there, along with her director. Everyone looked tense. One of the police representatives spoke first. "Agent, we'd like to start by saying we're deeply sorry for what happened last night." She nodded politely. "Thank you. But sorry isn't enough." They exchanged uneasy glances. "We agree. That's why we're here, to review the footage and take corrective action." The director turned to her. "We're also concerned about how this affects public trust," he said. "It's not just a local matter anymore." She folded her hands on the table. "Public trust shouldn't be your only concern. My son was profiled and frightened by your officers for no valid reason. I'm not here because of the video. I'm here because it could have gone very differently." The room went silent. One of the officers, clearly nervous, tried to explain. It was a misunderstanding. The car matched a description. She cut him off gently but firmly. "No, the plate didn't match. You didn't verify before you stopped him. You didn't radio it in. That's not a misunderstanding. That's negligence." He looked down, embarrassed. She leaned forward slightly. "Do you know what it's like to have your child freeze in fear because he doesn't know if following instructions will save him or get him hurt?" "I do, and I wouldn't wish that feeling on anyone." The room was still again. Even the air felt heavy. The director finally spoke. "What do you suggest we do?" She took a breath, gathering her thoughts. "You need to make changes that actually matter. Retraining is one thing, but accountability is another. These officers need to face review, and your department needs to rebuild its approach to community policing." The police chief nodded slowly. "We can arrange that." "Good," she said quietly. "Because people are watching now, and they should." After the meeting, she stepped outside into the crisp morning air. Reporters were already outside, cameras flashing as they tried to catch a glimpse of her. She didn't stop to give statements. She wasn't there for headlines. She just wanted justice and peace of mind for her son. Back home, her son sat on the couch scrolling through the news. The video had spread even further. Comments poured in, some praising his calmness, others angry at what they saw. He wasn't sure how to feel about strangers knowing his face, his fear, his story. When his mom came home later that day, he turned the screen off quickly. "Everyone's talking about it," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. "You okay with that?" He shrugged. "I don't know. It's weird. People keep saying I'm brave, but I wasn't. I was just scared." She sat beside him. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," she said softly. "It's doing the right thing while you're scared." He thought about that for a moment. "So what happens now?" "Now," she said, "we make sure something good comes from it." That night, she got a call from a community organization that focused on youth outreach and justice reform. They wanted her and her son to speak at an upcoming event about trust and awareness. At first, she hesitated. She didn't want to put him under more attention. But when she told him about it, he surprised her. "Maybe we should go," he said. "If people listen, maybe it helps someone else." She smiled, proud of his maturity. "All right," she said. "We'll go." The day of the event came quickly. The hall was full. Parents, students, police officers, and local leaders sat together waiting. The boy stood on stage beside his mother, a microphone in his shaking hands. He took a deep breath before speaking. "I never thought something like that would happen to me," he began. His voice was quiet but steady. "I always thought if you did everything right, you'd be safe. But that night I learned that sometimes people see you and decide who you are before you even say a word." The crowd listened closely. Some nodded, some looked down, lost in thought. He continued, "I don't hate the officers. I just want them to see me as a person next time, not a threat." His mother placed a hand on his shoulder, and when it was her turn to speak, she said, "What happened that night isn't just about one stop or two officers. It's about a system that needs healing. Change doesn't start with anger. It starts with understanding and with accountability." When they finished, the room erupted in applause. Some people had tears in their eyes. Even a few officers stood up and clapped. Afterward, several parents came up to thank them. A local reporter asked if she planned to take legal action, but she shook her head. "I'm not looking for revenge," she said. "I'm looking for change." That evening, as they drove home, the boy looked out the window. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange. "You think things will really change?" he asked quietly. His mother smiled faintly. "Not all at once," she said. "But every story like ours pushes the line forward just a little." He nodded, thinking about that. "I guess that's enough to start." When they got home, the house felt warmer somehow. The weight of fear had lifted, replaced by something new. Hope. The boy went to his room, opened his notebook, and started writing. He didn't know what to call it yet. Maybe just my story. But he knew he wanted to remember not just what happened, but how he grew from it. Downstairs, his mother sat on the couch, looking at her phone. Another message had come in, this time from the police chief. They wanted to collaborate with her to improve officer training and community relations. For the first time in days, she smiled. Maybe this really could lead somewhere better. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment, letting herself breathe. The night outside was calm again, the same kind of peace she had wished for the night before. And as she sat there, she felt something she hadn't felt since that terrible stop on the road. Relief. Her son was safe. The truth was out, and a new beginning had quietly started. The tension in the air was heavy, but slowly it started to fade. The two officers who had stopped the teenager were now standing back, their confident attitude replaced by nervous silence. The mother, calm but firm, didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The badge hanging from her belt said everything. Her son was still standing near the car, his hands trembling slightly. His mother looked at him and gave a small nod, the kind of look that said, "You're safe now." That single glance made his chest loosen a little. For a moment he had thought his life was about to take a turn he could never come back from. But now things were different. His mother had arrived and nothing escaped her control. She turned to the officers. "Do you have any idea why you stopped him?" she asked. Her tone was even, almost too calm, but there was power in every word. One of the officers tried to explain, fumbling for words. "Ma'am, we believe the car matched the description of a vehicle involved in a recent report." "A recent report?" she repeated. "Where's your record of that? Was it logged in your system?" The second officer looked at the first one, unsure what to say. "Well, we were just being cautious," he said softly, his earlier confidence gone. "Cautious?" she asked again, stepping closer. "You pulled a minor out of his car without cause. You had no backup, no probable reason, and your cameras weren't even turned on. Does that sound cautious to you?" Her words hit them hard. She wasn't shouting, but the quiet edge in her tone made every sentence feel like a strike. By now, a few cars had stopped on the side of the road. People were recording with their phones, whispering to each other. Some recognized her from the news. She had worked on several high-profile cases, and her face wasn't unfamiliar in this part of town. But tonight, she wasn't an agent on TV. She was a mother protecting her son. She pulled out her phone and began recording too. "State your names and badge numbers," she said. The officers hesitated. "Now," she added. They quickly did as she asked, speaking their names and numbers into the camera. She didn't respond. She just kept filming, her calmness making them more uncomfortable than any anger could have. Her son stood quietly beside her, watching. His heart was still pounding, but he couldn't help feeling proud. His mother wasn't just saving him. She was showing everyone that fear didn't always have to win. Moments later, another police car pulled up. The supervisor stepped out, a tall man with a serious expression. He walked over quickly, clearly already aware something had gone wrong. "Agent," he said, nodding at her with respect. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding." She crossed her arms. "Misunderstanding is a nice word for it," she said. "Your officers stopped my son without a reason, harassed him, and drew attention for no valid cause. I want to know how that's considered protocol." The supervisor looked from her to the two officers, then sighed. "You're right, ma'am. This shouldn't have happened." "I don't want apologies," she replied. "I want accountability. Because if I hadn't arrived when I did, this could have gone very differently." There was a long silence. Everyone around could feel it, the truth hanging there like a weight that no one wanted to touch. The officers looked down, embarrassed and uneasy. The supervisor turned to the teen. "I'm sorry, young man. You didn't deserve this." He nodded slightly but didn't say anything. His throat still felt tight. His mother finally lowered her phone. "I'll be filing a report," she said simply. "And I have everything I need on record." The crowd that had gathered began to clap softly, not out of mockery but respect. Some were whispering things like, "That woman's brave and good for her." The officers didn't make eye contact with anyone. They just stood there wishing they could disappear. After a few minutes, the mother gently touched her son's shoulder. "Let's go," she said. He nodded and got back into the car. She sat beside him, not saying a word as he started the engine. They drove off slowly, leaving behind flashing lights and a silent group of people who had just seen something unforgettable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The car was quiet except for the soft hum of the engine. The teen kept his eyes on the road, still trying to process what had happened. Finally, his mother broke the silence. "You okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, but his voice cracked when he said, "I thought they were going to—" He couldn't even finish the sentence. "I know," she said, her voice calm but full of emotion. "But you did exactly what I taught you. You stayed calm. You didn't argue. That probably saved you." He took a deep breath. "Mom, why do things like this keep happening? Why do they always think I'm doing something wrong?" She sighed deeply, staring out the window. "Because some people still see color before they see character," she said. "But that's why I do what I do. To change that," he nodded slowly. "I didn't realize how much you go through every day," he said. "It's not just about catching criminals, is it?" "No," she said quietly. "It's about protecting people who get judged before they even get a chance to speak." They drove in silence again, both lost in thought. Streetlights flashed across the windshield as they passed through the neighborhood. For the first time that evening, he noticed how quiet everything seemed, the calm after a storm. Back at home, they sat in the car for a while before going inside. She turned to him and said, "You're not weak for being scared. You're strong for staying calm. Remember that." He gave a small smile. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up," he said. She smiled faintly. "You would have made it through, but I'm glad I did." When they went inside, she immediately called a colleague to report the incident. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly as she held the phone. She wasn't just reporting it as a mother. She was doing it as an agent who understood the law better than anyone else in that room. Meanwhile, her son sat on the couch, scrolling through social media. Someone had already posted a short clip of the confrontation. The caption read, "Officers stopped teen for no reason until his mom showed up." The video was spreading fast. Within an hour, hundreds of people had shared it, most praising the mother for her courage and professionalism. Some even wrote that her calmness had probably prevented something tragic. The teen didn't know whether to feel proud or overwhelmed. His mother noticed what he was watching and walked over. "Don't let the internet define this moment for you," she said. "What matters is that you're okay." He nodded. "I know, but maybe people will finally see what really happens." She sat beside him. "Maybe, or maybe they'll just move on in a few days. But even if one person learns something from this, that's a start." They talked for a while longer about life, safety, and the importance of standing up for what's right, not through anger but through strength and knowledge. She told him that someday, he'd tell this story not as a victim, but as someone who overcame fear with dignity. Later that night, after he went to bed, she sat alone in the living room, staring at the quiet glow of her laptop screen. She began writing her official report. Every detail had to be exact. Every minute of that stop had to be recorded. She wasn't doing it just for her son. She was doing it for every parent who'd ever feared that call in the night. Outside, the world carried on as usual, but inside that home, something had changed. A young man had learned just how fragile safety could feel, and a mother had once again proven that strength doesn't always come from power. Sometimes it comes from calm, courage, and truth. And though the night had started with flashing lights and fear, it ended with quiet strength, the kind that could move mountains when the world was watching. The morning after the incident, the house was unusually quiet. The teen sat at the kitchen table staring at his cereal, though he hadn't touched it. The memory of the night before weighed on him, still fresh in his mind. He kept seeing the flashing lights, hearing the officers' harsh voices, and feeling that tight knot of fear in his chest. His mother poured herself a cup of coffee, sitting across from him. She watched him carefully, noting the subtle tremble in his hands and the way his eyes darted whenever a siren passed outside. She knew that fear didn't leave quickly, it lingered. "You didn't sleep much either," he said quietly, finally breaking the silence. "I didn't," she admitted. "I kept thinking about you, about what could have happened." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I keep replaying it. I don't think I've ever been that scared in my life." She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "It's okay to feel that way," she said gently. "Being scared doesn't make you weak. It means you're human. What matters is what you do in the fear, and you did exactly what I taught you." He looked down at her hand, feeling a little comforted. I don't get it. I didn't do anything wrong. Why do things like that happen?" She sighed deeply. "Because some people see assumptions before they see people. They judge before they understand. That's the world we live in, but that's why we fight to make it better." He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "I guess now I know why your job is so important." She smiled faintly. "It's not just a job. It's about protecting people who can't always protect themselves. And now, you've experienced a little of what that really means." After breakfast, they turned on the news. The video from the night before had gone viral. The clip showed the mother stepping in calmly, flashing her badge and taking control of the situation. People all over the city were commenting. Many praised her for her courage, while others expressed outrage at the officer's behavior. The teen watched quietly, still processing. "People are seeing it," he said. "They are," his mother replied. "And that's part of the change. Awareness is the first step." Over the next few days, the police department began taking action. The officers involved were put on administrative leave, while an internal review was conducted. Training sessions on bias and community interaction were scheduled for the entire precinct. The mother stayed involved, sharing her insights and offering guidance not just as a parent, but as a professional who had seen too many similar situations end tragically. At school, the teen noticed that classmates were talking about the incident. Some whispered about how brave he had been. Others simply wanted to know the truth. He found himself explaining calmly, trying to convey that it wasn't about being brave. It was about staying calm, following instructions, and being careful. He realized that even though he had been scared, he had learned something important. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting with care and respect even when you were afraid. One afternoon, his mother came home from work early. She found him sitting on the couch with a notebook in front of him, scribbling down thoughts. "What are you writing?" she asked. "My story," he said simply. "I want to remember what happened, and I want to tell other people, so maybe they know what to do if it happens to them." She sat beside him, reading a few lines quietly. "This is good," she said. "It's powerful. Writing down your experience helps you understand it, and sharing it can help others." They spent the evening talking about the incident, about the fear he felt, and the strength it took to stay calm. She explained that sometimes people wouldn't understand the fear until they lived it themselves, but by speaking out, they could make a difference. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the situation began to settle. The officers returned to duty after retraining, but the internal review had left a mark on the department. Policies were updated, new training implemented, and the community watched closely. People began to realize that accountability wasn't just a word. It was action, and it mattered. The teen started attending school again, though he still felt nervous at times. Every siren, every police car passing by reminded him of the night that had changed his perspective forever. But he also felt stronger. He had faced fear, and he had survived. He had learned to trust his instincts, to stay calm, and to rely on the people who cared for him. His mother continued her work, but she made time for him in ways that mattered. They talked openly about life, fairness, and justice. They discussed how to use knowledge and experience to help others, to prevent mistakes from happening again. The community began to notice. Local organizations invited them to speak at youth events, sharing lessons about safety, awareness, and standing up for oneself respectfully. The teen was hesitant at first, unsure if he wanted to be in the spotlight, but his mother encouraged him. "If your story helps even one person, it's worth sharing," she said. He eventually agreed. Standing on stage, speaking to a group of students and parents, he described his experience calmly. "I was scared," he said, "more scared than I had ever been. But I stayed calm. I listened. I followed instructions, and my mom showed up and helped me when things could have gotten worse. I learned that staying calm and knowing your rights can make all the difference." The audience listened in silence, some nodding, some wiping tears from their eyes. When he finished, they applauded loudly. Some of the officers who had attended the event quietly nodded, acknowledging the importance of what he had said. His mother spoke next, highlighting accountability, fairness, and the importance of understanding before judging. She didn't speak to shame anyone. She spoke to teach, to inspire change. Her words were firm but calm, demonstrating that authority could be used responsibly and justly. After the event, they walked home together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft colors. "I think we made a difference today," she said quietly. He nodded. "Yeah, and I think I'm ready to keep sharing my story." The next few weeks brought more changes. The police department updated its community outreach programs. Officers were encouraged to engage with residents, to understand their lives before making assumptions. The teen saw some of the officers he had encountered making small but meaningful gestures of change, listening more, observing more, reacting with caution rather than fear. He and his mother continued to talk about the incident, but now their conversations also included lessons about empathy, responsibility, and hope. He began to understand that fear was natural, but courage came from acting thoughtfully despite it. One evening, they sat on the porch together, the quiet hum of the neighborhood around them. He asked, "Mom, do you think people really listen when things like this happen?" She smiled softly. "Some do. Some don't. But even one person learning something from your story makes it worth telling." He nodded, feeling a sense of pride and purpose he hadn't known before. He understood now that the story wasn't just about fear or anger. It was about change, awareness, and responsibility, lessons that could reach far beyond that quiet street where it had all begun. The mother looked at him, seeing not just her son but a young man who had faced real fear and come through it stronger. "You did well," she said. "More than you realize," he smiled faintly. "I couldn't have done it without you." "And you never have to," she replied. "I'll always be here." As night fell, the house settled into calm again. The teen went to bed with a sense of relief he hadn't felt in weeks. He thought about what he had learned about courage, respect, and awareness. He knew that fear could return, but now he felt prepared. He understood what it meant to stay calm, to trust his instincts, and to rely on the people who truly cared for him. The mother stayed up for a little while longer, reviewing notes for her work and reflecting on the past few days. She felt a mix of exhaustion and hope. The night had been frightening, but it had also shown her the power of calm authority and careful action. It had reminded her why she did what she did, and why protecting people, especially those who are vulnerable, mattered more than anything else. By the time she went to bed, the neighborhood was silent. The stars above glimmered faintly, and a sense of peace had returned to their home. The teen slept soundly, a new understanding and strength resting within him. The incident that had begun with fear, tension, and uncertainty ended with reflection, learning, and hope. It became more than a single night on the road. It became a story of awareness, courage, and the importance of standing up for what is right. And in that quiet, the mother and son knew that while the world wasn't perfect, they had faced something difficult and come through together, stronger and wiser, ready to continue making a difference in ways big and small. The story wasn't over. Change rarely happens overnight, but it had started. And that, they both realized, was enough to keep moving forward.